Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome to the channel. I've been playing Pokemon Pocket for quite some time. I have got loads of games under my belt now, and I've got a pretty good grasp on kind of where the meta is. So I kind of know where I feel most decks should be. What I'm going to do in this tier list is I'm going to give you a general overview of the state of the meta in Pokemon Pocket, which decks are the highest performing, which decks are the lowest performing, and I'll talk a little bit about each deck as we go. Now, what I'm going to do to represent this is I'm going to be using cards from the sort of the premier card from that deck, or the card identity. So let's say first example is Pikachu X. What I'm going to be doing is using a Pikachu X card as the focal point. Speaking of Pikachu X, it is going straight into S tier. Pikachu X is probably the best deck in the game right now. The reason being is that it's super quick to get online. All you need is Pikachu X, which is a basic Pokemon, and 3 other basic electric type Pokemon on your bench. You can put Electrode in, you can put Zapdos X in for an alternative win condition, you can put normal Zapdos in, practically any electric Pokemon will do. There is a whole host of things that realistically don't matter in this deck, and you can literally just run Pikachu X with a boatload of garbage behind it. And as long as you get a good start and you can get Pikachu X out quickly, this deck is practically unstoppable. You place Pikachu X down, you place as many basic type Pokemon in your bench slots as you can, obviously electric, you slot energy onto Pikachu, and then you blast the target for 90 damage every round. Not only that, is that it beats the Starmie deck as well, because it is obviously good against water-type Pokemon, so even if your Pikachu goes down, you've still got some heavy hitters in the likes of Electrode that does 70 damage base, but then obviously will do 90 damage to water Pokemon, and the Starmie deck is also very, very good. So, in my opinion, Pikachu kind of lives up there at the absolute top, and he's, I think, genuinely just the best deck. Speaking of Starmie, also rate it in the S tier. Slightly behind Pikachu, but also think Starmie X is an incredibly good deck. I think you can either use Articuno, some people have been using Lapras. There are plenty of other X Pokemon that you can include in here. I like to use Articuno X because it's a cheaper recall cost than Lapras, but I have seen people using Lapras just because of the novelty of the new card. And so Starmie X is another winner. And again, the reason Starmie X is so good, in my opinion, is because of how quick it is. It is a Staryu into a Stage 1 evolution Starmie that does 90 damage for 2 energy and has a recall cost of 0. So you can essentially get it out of a dangerous situation for free. And with Misty, you can also just straight up stack your Articuno for a load of energy tokens and have another win condition in the bag. So really, really good deck. And in general, very quick pace, slightly outclassed by Pikachu just due to the type differential between the two of them. But really, Starmie is fantastic in my opinion, just a very strong deck. And I don't think there's going to be any surprises when I talk about the final deck that rounds out the S tier. It is, of course, Mewtwo. Mewtwo is good, but dependent on a few things going right for you. I think you can brick Mewtwo harder than you can brick Pikachu or Starmie, personally. With Pikachu, you have the Pikachu X, which is a basic Pokemon, so you've got you can draw it with the Pokeball. You have a lot of high performance alternative win conditions. Electrode is a pretty solid Stage 1 evolution. You've got Zapdos as well. Multiple win conditions are always a good thing for consistency across win rates. Starmie, you've got Starmie, really easy X Pokemon to get out onto the field with a low energy cost requirement. And then also you've got Articuno with Misty as a secondary win condition. With Mewtwo, it's just Mewtwo. Now, Mewtwo X is great, 150 HP and 150 damage. So really strong, but it requires 4 energy. 4 energy is tough to get without a generator. Of course, we use Gardevoir for a generator, but that is a stage 2 evolution. However, if you get Gardevoir on the field and you get Mewtwo in and you get 4 energy, practically unstoppable. As long as you have a Gardevoir and a Mewtwo, you're using your side drive every single turn, which practically one-shots anything. So yeah, it's really good, but I just feel like it's a little less consistent than Pikachu and Starmie. Still an incredibly good deck though, which is why I'm placing up there in the S tier. Charizard. People love Charizard. I have a load of Charizard fans in my comments, and I agree Charizard is good. It is a beefier, heavier hitting Mewtwo without the generator. Obviously, you can use Moltres X to generate for your Charmander, which then could set up for your Charizard. But what is the reason this is slightly lower than Mewtwo? Stage 2 evolution. So instead of needing to just put a Mewtwo X out, which is a basic Pokemon, you instead have to go Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard. So you've at least got 3 steps whilst you're stacking energy. And then obviously Moltres, it's not a guaranteed energy generation. It is a coin flip. So you could absolutely brick it and get no energy. You know, you could get 1 energy, whatever. Moltres can be good, but ultimately also is a bit more RNG dependent in terms of getting energy allocated to the Charizard. However, once you get Charizard going, much like Mewtwo, it's a good spot. The one downside is you need to be super specific about when you use your first hit with Charizard. You do not have the freedom of getting 2 energy in a turn like you do with Mewtwo. Mewtwo on the active slot with a Gardevoir behind is a guaranteed 2 energy per turn, which means when you discard 2 energy, you're side driving every turn. Once you use your 200 damage smash attack, which I obviously can't remember the name of whilst I'm talking in this video, you don't get 2 free energy generation. So, you know, you have to then either suck it up and use his 3 energy attack on the next turn, or, you know, wait 2 rounds or try and retreat or something. So, you know, it's not as consistent, and obviously you need to time that attack really well. Whereas with Mewtwo, once you get it set up, it's basically side driving everything every turn, which makes it so strong. Okay, next. Next is the Primeape deck. I was so close to putting this in S tier. I think it could be. Maybe I'll eat my words on this. It is just as quick as the Pikachu and Starmie deck. Technically out damages them, but just isn't as beefy. Primeape is not got as much HP, so obviously can get one shot by Pikachu and Starmie and can't one shot Pikachu and Starmie. That's the only downside of the Primeape deck versus the Pikachu and Starmie decks. I am not in fact chatting out my ass. I am actually chatting out of my mouth, and it was correct. You can one-shot Pikachu. Also, do pretty well against Mewtwo as well. But frankly, not so great against Starmie. So again, like swings and roundabouts, but it can be strong in these situations. But again, it kind of really just comes down to sometimes who's going second. And I just think that a little bit more setup dependent as well. You need to have your stage 2 evolution. You need to have had a Mankey to open up with. That Mankey needs to have attacked and damaged itself using the promo Mankey. And so obviously compared to just things like with the Pikachu where you could just slam it on the board. And obviously you can also just pick Pikachu on your bench and swap it in. That's one of the other things to consider. If you know you're going up against a Primeape deck as a Pikachu, then you put Pikachu X on your bench and you wait for Primeape to stack up. Primeape attacks, kills like your Voltorb or Electrode or something. As long as you've got a backup to put on the bench the next turn, you can then just go and one-shot the Primeape. So a lot of it comes down to tactical play, but could be S tier, getting close, but not 100% sold just yet. So I know a lot of people love the Venusaur deck. I've seen a lot of people rate the Venusaur deck quite highly, if not in the same sort of category as the Starmie X deck. And don't get me wrong, your boy Venusaur is pretty tanky and has a lot of healing, and in combined with Erica, basically survives forever. It is only a 100 damage. It is only a 100 damage 4 energy attack, but you know, contrary to like Charizard and contrary to Mewtwo, does not discard any energy once it uses that attack, but it is only 100 damage. So when you're comparing it to Charizard can one-shot Venusaur, obviously even with the type disadvantage not even taking into account. Mewtwo can one-shot Venusaur over 2 turns. Venusaur can obviously one-shot Mewtwo over 2 turns as well. But you know, like it just comes down to who gets down first. What I would say is obviously it's also kind of Lilligant dependent, and Lilligant needs to be in your active slot. You then need to assign energy to Lilligant as opposed to Gardevoir. I don't know. I don't see it as powerful as some of the other sort of starter X's. Kind of down there with Blastoise. I think Blastoise is worse than Venusaur, but I don't think Venusaur's quite as good as some of the A-tier decks here. Personally, that's how I feel anyway. Happy to disagree if you guys feel that way. You guys are going to have to keep reminding me to adjusting my tier list, because every time I put a new card in a new tier, it stretches the tier list out, and yeah, it gets a bit messy. Right, let's go to the next one, which we are going to look at Marowak. So, controversial opinion, I don't rate Marowak super highly. The reason being is it's an RNG dependent damager. I really don't like Pokemon that can 0 or 150 you. The problem with Marowak is it can very easily 0 just as easily as it can 160. So that's why, in terms of consistency, I don't love decks that revolve around the need for a coin flip to get your outcome to be good. Obviously, the standard outcome is usually just going to be 1 heads, 1 tails. That's going to be 50% of the time. 25% of the time, you're going to two heads. 25% of the time, you're going to hit 0. That means that you could one-shot the enemy Mewtwo, or you could do no damage and just get one-shot yourself. Personally, I don't rate those kind of decks as highly as some of the other decks and the more consistent decks out there, but they are fun, and they definitely have huge upside as well. Speaking of, that brings me to the Exeggutor X deck, which I really like the version that Mega Mogwai made, which includes the Butterfreeze and just how you heal consistently. It kind of sits in the same category. What I would say about Exeggutor X is that at least you're guaranteed 40 damage for 1 energy, which is pretty good. Low damage, but it can obviously spike to 80. Even so, like, you need to get this out early, and you need to start really going hard with this from the very early game. It gets outclassed in the late game by most other X Pokemon. So that's why I just don't think Exeggutor generally has enough pressure to sort of put things like Pikachu and Starmie out of the meta. However, it potentially can outlast if you've got the Ericas and the Butterfreeze going. But just again, consistency, and ultimately I don't see it being anything other than kind of a Mewtwo counter. Like, I like it because it's kind of good against Mewtwo. That's kind of where I see Exeggutor, right? It's 160 HP, so can't get one shot by Mewtwo, even if it did hit its full side drive. Then you have Erica and Butterfree and whatever else you want to run in terms of potions, and you could potentially just heal all the way up. And obviously you can start putting pressure onto Mewtwo or onto Rolt and its evolution pathway from 1 energy. So basically from turn 2, as soon as the first turn that you can evolve, you can start slamming Exeggutor X down and start getting damage out. But then there's a lot of other decks that will be able to cope with that pressure and deal just as much damage back. Things like the Starmie and the Pikachu are able to kind of meet the pace, as well as the Primeape deck can kind of meet that pace and even do more damage. So just worth noting that, I think it's really good against Mewtwo, for instance, but I think, candidly, maybe just not as strong against some of the other more consistent fast X decks. So a deck that I think is criminally underrated is actually Blaine. I've been playing with Blaine a lot, and I think it's a really good deck. I think, the aggro, there's a lot of really strong, low energy, high damage fire Pokemon. Tends to be their shtick. They discard an energy, but they deal a boatload of damage. I think Blaine, especially when you're playing around Ninetales, can do a huge amount of damage really early. So I really like Blaine. The Blaine decks with Ninetales and Ponyta, I think, or Rapidash, think it's a really, really cool deck that's a little bit criminally underused. Maybe I'm overestimating its capabilities a little bit, but I've really been enjoying playing Blaine. And the other benefit is that it's just a very quick deck. So, you can try and get things out before enemies can even establish their Charizards, their Venusaurs, their Mewtwo's. Obviously, we'll still struggle to the likes of Starmie. Probably why it's not up in S tier, and obviously we'll struggle again with the pace of Pikachu as well sometimes. But again, I rate Blaine. I think it's a very strong non-X deck. It's an X deck. It doesn't include an X Pokemon here at all. So I really rate Blaine. Maybe I'm overstating Blaine here, guys. Feel free to tell me if you think I am. But I rate it. I think it's cool. All right, Blastoise. Look, I think in terms of all of the starter Pokemon, they did your boy Blastoise the dirtiest. Not because he's a bad card. 100 damage for 3 energy. If you have 4 energy and 2 of those happen to be water energy, then it's 160 damage. He's got a shit ton of HP. The boy is a tank. The problem with Blastoise is it's Misty reliant. Whether you're actually going to get this to work or not. And everyone knows, sometimes Misty gives you 15,000 fucking coin flips in a row. Sometimes you land tails on your first trip flip and you've wasted a trainer card. That's my problem with the Blastoise deck. I think ultimately, every other, like Lilligant for Venusaur, Moltres X for Charizard, Mewtwo's got Gardevoir, Starmie and Pikachu require fuck all energy in the first place. For Blastoise, it's like you've only got Misty. There's no other way to generate energy for your Blastoise deck. And therefore, you're either going to be sitting there, stacking energy on your Blastoise, or you've got to just get Misty. And the other problem with the Blastoise deck is you don't really run any other water Pokemon. So you don't really run anything else with it. You run Meowths for card draw, for consistency, but you're not running any other strong threats. So you're basically just reliant on Blastoise, and that's it. And the reason being is you can't really run anything that is energy hungry, because you need to give all your energy to Blastoise, otherwise it's not going to work. The thing is with like Venusaur, if you give your energy to Lilligant, it's going to give energy back to Venusaur. If you give energy to Moltres to use Flame Dance, whatever it's called, it's giving energy back to Charizard. If you don't need to give energy to bloody Ralts and Gardevoir, but if you did, they're still generating it for free on your Mewtwo every single turn, and that energy can still be used to retreat your Lilia when you need to. So the problem with Blastoise is that it needs all the energy, and the only way you can generate energy on it is by Mistying it, and therefore you can't really give energy to anybody else, because if you do and you fail your Misty, then you've got no win condition, which is why I think Blastoise is not so strong. All right, your boy Melmetal. I want this to be a really good deck, and contrary to maybe what I titled my video yesterday, I don't think it's the best deck in the world. I think it's a fun deck that has its place versus Pikachu. Potentially has its place versus Starmie. It's a pretty good Pikachu and Starmie counter, if I'm honest with you. The reason being is that what I like about Melmetal is that you can use your Meltan to amass the first turn and basically build up energy so that you could evolve second turn. And if you're going second, you basically get like into turn 3 and have a 4 energy Melmetal and start slapping people for 120 damage. Also, you take 20 less damage from all sources, which is absolutely fantastic. So Melmetal is fantastic, but again, I think one of the problems that I'm having with Melmetal to really make it a top tier variant is that I'm not entirely certain what the complementary package with Melmetal needs to be right now. Do I think it's better than Venusaur or Marowak? I'm not sure. Maybe it's criminal to suggest that. Actually, no, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. F it. It's going in A tier. I love Melmetal. This boy is a monster. I love him. He's awesome. All right, the Koga Wheezing Coughing Arbok deck. No, Muck. The Arbok Muck Wheezing deck with Koga. Koga's the guy. This is a deck that's really cool. It involves getting Wheezing into the active slot, poisoning the enemy active Pokemon, retreating him for free, negating some damage, basically baiting out attacks, pulling him back, fully healing him, bringing Muck in, slapping them for loads of damage. I think it's 120 if they're poisoned. So it's a really high skill cap deck. Super high skill cap, but very reliant on what cards you've actually got. I mean, it's kind of the same with all Pokemon decks, but this so even more so. Reliant on getting your evolutions, and you really can't afford to make that many mistakes in this deck. It is super, super decision heavy. It definitely has the ability to beat out things like Mewtwo. Do I think it's got the ability to beat out things like Pikachu and Starmie? Probably not. Those decks are probably a little too quick. It is afforded a benefit by its sort of basic Pokemon being quite high HP, but still think it gets outpaced a little bit by the likes of Mewtwo and Starmie. Sorry, by Starmie and Pikachu. But I still think it has its place versus the slower decks, and definitely can kind of like outplay them a little bit with Koga for sure. I love it. It's a really cool deck to play, but I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the best in the world. So if you haven't, I'm putting Articuno in here, but it could be Articuno or Zapdos deck. And this is a deck that I've only played a couple of times, but it's essentially playing just Articuno or Zapdos, guaranteeing that you get that in your opening hand, and then essentially playing every other support card in the book. Hand Scope, Pokeball, Potion, Red Card, X-Speed, Giovanni, Misty, Professor's Research, Sabrina, you name it. And it's just about supporting that one Pokemon, guaranteed to get things going. Obviously, with Articuno, in my opinion, super Misty reliant, as Articuno always is. And Zapdos, you just need to stall, which you can kind of do. But again, I don't rate these decks too highly. They're a bit of a one-trick pony deck. If they work, they work. If you flip the coins on Misty and you get Articuno casting Blizzard on the first turn, great. Zapdos is a little worse, in my opinion, because you don't have any solid energy generation for it. But it's a fun, gimmicky deck that I don't think is that great. It's okay. If I didn't think, actually, do you know what? I'm putting it down in D tier. I think it does a disservice to Blastoise to say it's better than Blastoise. The problem with the deck is that also you only have 2 Pokemon. So if you don't get what you want, that's it. And you have to commit energy. You have to commit energy generating to one of them. And if they die, then you've got to start over again. It's just not consistent. However, if you do pull Articuno and Misty on the first turn, Misty Articuno, well, obviously you're guaranteed to pull Articuno on the first turn. Misty Articuno up to 3 energy on the first turn. Boom. You're blizzarding everybody and they have nothing to do. So, it can win first turn, but it's just a bit RNG reliant, which is, I don't rate RNG reliant decks that much. All right, Arbok. It's similar to the Koga deck, but you don't run Muck. And it's more about Arbok Wheezing. You can run an Arbok Pidgeotto variant as well, but I think the problem with Pidgeot and Arbok is it requires too many evolution pathways to be really good. Whereas if you just run Arbok Wheezing, you've only got 2 stage 1s. And so that to me is that's okay. With Arbok, the whole point of the deck is that you swap out with Sabrina or whatever, an energy hungry Pokemon. You hopefully you apply a poison with Wheezing, and then you switch them out with Koga, drop Arbok in, you corner them so they can't retreat, and they're just sat there doing nothing, taking damage, while potentially having no energy applied to them. A lot of moving parts to make it work, but when it works. It's really cool. It's a great, really high skill cap deck. Love these types of decks. They require a lot of thinking, but again, just if you've got an X Pikachu that can just drop 2 energy on your head and slap you for 90 damage every turn, you can see why these decks probably aren't as strong in the meta. Dragonite. Everyone is going to hate me for saying this, but Dragonite sucks. The reason being is that it is just frankly a victim of the multi-energy deck. The problem with Dragonite is that sometimes you can just straight up brick your energy. Now, you know, Dragonite is okay. It only requires one water energy and 1 electric energy. But my gosh, you can brick it so hard and just be sat doing nothing. And also it's kind of random, his actual damage. The problem is that it can hit a bench Pokemon, which is obviously fantastic, but it is random which one it does. So even if you do get Dragonite online, you're not necessarily going to get the outcome that you want. So all that work to get Dragonite online, and you might not even get the outcome that you want, not great. So like you could, obviously the damage gets applied based on one of the 4 Pokemon it chooses. So it does 50 damage based on which Pokemon it chose. It could do 200 damage to a Pokemon. It could do 50 to all the Pokemon. It could do 100 to a freaking Caterpie on the bench. It even if that Pokemon is considered dead, it will still do 100 damage to them. So that's why it's a little bit inconsistent. The other thing is that there are no energy, again, with a 4 energy Pokemon, no energy generation tactics for Dragonite. You just need to stall it out. People sometimes stall with, like, I've seen people use Snorlax. I've seen people use coughing and wheezing as a stall tactic with Koga. It's just not consistent enough. That's the problem. Fun deck, though. If I was doing a fun tier list, Dragonite would be S tier. But I'm doing a good tier list, not a fun tier list. Okay, the Vileplume deck that I played in my free-to-play decks, I kind of like it. I think it's really cool. The only problem that I do have with these types of decks is, again, it's coin flip reliant. The thing I like about Vileplume is it's not super energy dependent. And, you know, you can run it with several packages. You can run it with Lilligant, or you can run it with anything, really. And if you do get the sleep, it can be really obnoxious to deal with. So I really like Vileplume. I think it's a really cool deck. I've definitely been playing it in the ranked ladder. I wouldn't say it's like amazing, but I also wouldn't say it's terrible either, which is why I've kind of solidly put it in B tier. All right, Moltres X deck. If you don't know what a Moltres X deck is, it's basically Moltres and Centiskorch. So Centiskorch is a stage 1 evolution Pokemon that deals 130 damage but requires 4 energy to do so, and it obviously discards energy when it casts as well. It's basically budget Charizard at stage 1. That's what Centiskorch does. And again, it relies on Moltres to generate energy for it. So really what you find with these types of decks, especially when you've got a Moltres generating deck, similar problem to Charizard. Once you cast your ability, then you need to like generate energy for it. One of the benefits of Centiskorch, though, is that it only discards 1 energy. So if you have it in the active slot, you can just put another energy on it, and then it gets back to its 130 damage. It has only got 130 HP, though, so it's a little bit vulnerable. And of course, again, takes a little while to ramp up and a little bit RNG reliant, dependent on what coin flip happens with Moltres. What I would say as well is that obviously with Starmie being so popular, like generally fire decks aren't as strong, especially fire decks that aren't doing much at the start. if Starmie can get onto a Moltres, like you're dead in 2 rounds, and then obviously you then got to get Center Scorch out, who's then also dead in 2 rounds. So yeah, Moltres X is cool. I think it's definitely a cool deck, but personally just think it's a worse version of the Charizard deck, if I'm honest with you. Oh no, guys, my first addition to the F tier, it's Gengar. Oh, guys, Gengar is such a cool Pokemon. And I really, really love Gengar as a Pokemon in design, but it is an X Pokemon with a 100 damage attack. Its ability is really cool. You know, can't use supporter cards while Gengar is in the active act slot, but a lot of the time that's not that relevant because you're going to be going up against Pikachu's, Starmies, and Mewtwo's. It can't one-shot any of them, and it will those types of cards are going to be happy to hit on a Gengar. And Gengar also takes 3 energy, so it's slower than Starmie and Pikachu, and only does 10 more damage. So it's just not relevant. If you're going to run a Psychic deck, you're running Mewtwo. You're not running Gengar. Gengar is also a stage 2 evolution, so you've got to go Ghastly, Haunted, Gengar. You've got to get those as well. You obviously can run it with like Drowsy and Hypno, and obviously go for the sleep. But yeah, I just don't know. I don't know, guys. I wish Gengar was better. 170 HP, that's a good thing, but it just doesn't do enough damage to be competitive with some of the other X Pokemon. All right, guys, Machamp. Machamp X. It is a stage 2 evolution. It has a very cool tempo curve where you've got Machop at 1 energy, Machoke at 2 energy, and Machamp at 3 energy. So if you have the evolution, you can basically keep the pressure up all the way through. They all boast a very, very healthy HP pool. Machop at 70, Machoke at 100, Machamp at 180. But it's just a bit lackluster overall. It's 3 damage for 3 energy for 120 damage. That's great, but it would one-shot Pikachu and Starmie. However, Pikachu and Starmie, maybe with a Giovanni, could end up just one-shotting Machoke before you're even able to evolve. And if they see that you've got a Machoke out there and they're not able to get the damage down, they'll probably just switch out the Pokemon, especially Starmie will switch out. It doesn't one-shot Mewtwo, and it gets one-shot by Charizard, doesn't one-shot Venusaur. It's a very meh card. There are better X Pokemon to play. It's cool and maybe has its place if there were more sort of like lightning type decks or even like more psychic type decks that come out that are just within the range of Machamp knocking them through. But I think I'm not entirely convinced that this deck is any good. And actually it runs Marowak in it as well. The typical list runs Marowak. So in my eyes, why not just play Marowak? If you're going to run Machamp, at least run something additional to Machamp that isn't just Marowak. Because if I'm going to run Marowak, I'll just play a Marowak deck. There's no need for me to play Machamp. I can play a Marowak deck that's probably better. Okay, Arcanine X, going in D tier. I think Arcanine X has legs. I think it's a deck that with Moltres, it can counter the likes of Pikachu pretty quickly. However, I'm adding the caveat here. I think there are just better Pikachu counters out there without playing Arcanine. Arcanine, again, kind of reliant on some coin flips and Moltres to get you going. And I could just play like Primeape, or I could just play Meltan or Marowak, or lots of things. I think Arcanine is it's okay, but it has its like the one deck that it's good at is against Pikachu, and I think there are just other good Pikachu counters out there. Like I'd actually play Meltan over Arcanine. They're both stage 1 evolutions. Yes, Meltan requires 1 more energy, but it also self-generates the energy. So, and then takes less damage versus Pikachu, and also doesn't damage itself when it deals the damage. So not only does Meltan have a passive that reduces damage it deals to it, it also deals the same amount of damage as Arcanine, self-generates an extra energy if you're able to play Meltan first. Sorry, Melmetal is the evolution, obviously. And then obviously just deals the same damage without damaging itself. And even has a similar amount of HP. I think actually Melmetal does have Melmetal does have lower HP, but than Arcanine. I think generally there are no beefy boys that have got the same amount. But it's got 130, which is only 20 less, and then Arcanine deals damage to itself anyway. So yeah, I think Arcanine's okay. I don't think it's amazing. I wouldn't play it over I wouldn't even play it over Moltres Center Scorch realistically. Well, actually, no, maybe I would. That's maybe a lie. Either way, they both do similar things. Like Moltres Center Scorch and Moltres Arcanine basically do the same thing. But obviously just one of them is using Arcanine instead. All right, looking at Wigglytuff now. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh putting her in the Machamp tier. Wigglytuff's probably a little bit better than that. I think the problem with Wigglytuff is that it's like a Vileplume, but worse. I suppose it's a stage 1 evolution, but then like there's no way to support colorless Pokemon. There's no way to support normal type Pokemon, not easily anyway. So I've seen these decks be fun, but yeah, like the thing is also that it's not that much better than Vileplume, and Vileplume's also not an X Pokemon. So if you do get Vileplume knocked out, you're not losing 2 points, you're losing 1. Whereas Wigglytuff, you're losing 2. And the thing with Vileplume is it's not actually that. I think Vileplume literally has the same HP as Wigglytuff. They're both 140. So it's like they're the same Pokemon. Wigglytuff evolves 1 stage earlier, but you can't support Wigglytuff with anything because it's a colorless Pokemon, and it basically does the same thing as Vileplume. So yeah, that's why I put it a little bit lower. I love sleep decks, they're cool, but yeah, not that great. I'm putting Golurk in the list, but I'm not going to talk about it too much. Golurk is like, I like it, it's really fun, but it's like meme Mewtwo. It requires 4 energy, and then you have to coin flip to see if you do any damage. It's like meme Mewtwo. It can one-shot practically everything if you get 2 heads, but it's meme Mewtwo, which is why it's down in D tier. All right, a deck that I haven't played a huge amount of, but I really want to, is Alakazam. Alakazam is an interesting Pokemon. It's a stage 2 evolution, 3 energy requirement, 60 damage, but does 30 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon. That means against things like Mewtwo, you can do 160 damage, 180 damage in 1 hit if he's got set up for a side drive. The only caveat here is that most of the time, if Mewtwo's got 4 energy, he's casting side drive. You're very rarely swapping an Alakazam in when the Mewtwo's got 4 energy. And yeah, most of the time, if that 4 energy exists on them, it's going to have been used. Good against things like if you are going against a Meltan or like a Venusaur, for instance, with a Giovanni, it can one-shot a Venusaur, which is great. So yeah, and it can also, like with Starmie, with a Giovanni, should be able to one-shot Starmie. So like it will do, I think if Starmie has 2 energy on it, it would do 120, and then obviously if you Giovanni, that'll 130, which should like one-shot the Starmie, and obviously could also just straight up one-shot the Pikachu as well. So, you know, it has the ability to knock out these X-type Pokemon. Not always going to be great into things like the Mewtwo though, because they would very rarely sit on that 4 energy, which means they kind of sit out of the one-shot range. The only way that you could potentially take advantage of it is if you are going to play into a Mewtwo that's sitting on 3 energy, awaiting that 4th energy, swapping Alakazam in, and then one-shotting the Mewtwo, because it should deal 150 damage with the 3 energy attached. But again, that's a kind of niche case scenario. Still a cool deck, though. Very cool. I like the anti-meta capabilities of it. Nidoking and Nidoqueen deck. Once touted as like a counter to Mewtwo because of the dark type, and obviously can do a lot of damage, but one massive problem. Nidoqueen relies on Nidokings being on your bench. I mean, you've got to get so many stage 2 evolutions to make this deck work. And then it still just gets one-shot by things like Mewtwo. So, yeah, I mean, it's cool deck, cool deck concept, but requires too many moving parts to be good. You need to have everything, like your stars need to be in a row to make your Nidoqueen deck work, in my opinion. I could be wrong, happy to be someone talk me down here, but I think like that's my take on the Nidoqueen and Nidoking deck. Any deck that requires 2 stage 3 evolutions to actually function, not like stage 3 evolutions to support, but two stage 3 evolutions to actually function, that's not a good look in my book. I think that's too reliant on evolutions to make it work. All right, guys, I think that's practically all of the major deck variants at the moment. What do you guys think? I'm going to try and link as many of these decks in the description as possible from Pokemon Zone. That'll be the basic lists. Pokemon Zone is a great website, by the way. I think it's awesome. I actually wish it got updated more frequently. Hoping they'll do another update relatively soon. But Pokemon Zone is an awesome website. Do go and check it out. And yeah, and hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Have I hit the mark here? Do you think this is relatively reasonable, or do you think that this is a shitty tier list? I'm happy to hear either way. It's a tier list after all. It is an opinion. See you soon.